Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the TCS Defender and watched the view screen display the swirling colors of the neutral zone. For 3 months, the Galactic Empire had been testing humanity's patience and sending scout ships closer and closer to Terran space. Today, that patience had run out, and everyone on the bridge knew something big was about to happen. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her communications station, and her fingers moved quickly across the control panel. She looked up at Jake and spoke in a clear voice. "Admiral Hayes is on secure channel, sir." Jake straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put her through," he said, and the main screen flickered to life. Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared on the display, and her expression was grim and determined. "Commander Morrison, you are to deliver the following message to the Imperial Fleet at coordinates 793. Terran Command is officially closing our borders to all Galactic Empire vessels. Any attempt to cross into our territory will be met with immediate military response." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, and the crew on the bridge went completely silent. This was the moment everyone had been anticipating and dreading at the same time. The Galactic Empire controlled over 400 systems and considered themselves the supreme authority in this sector of space. Humanity controlled only 37 systems, and that was barely a fraction of Imperial territory. The Empire had thousands of warships and resources beyond counting, while humanity had less than 200 ships in total. Jake took a deep breath and responded, "Understood, Admiral. What are our rules of engagement?" The Admiral's eyes were hard as steel when she answered, "Defend our border by any means necessary. The Council has had enough of their intimidation tactics. We are done being pushed around." The transmission ended and Jake turned to face his crew. "You heard the Admiral," he said in a firm voice. "Navigation set course for the Imperial Fleet. Tactical, bring all weapons online but keep them powered down. Let's not start a war before we deliver the message." Lieutenant Danny Price was the ship's navigator, and he was young but highly skilled. "Course laid in, sir," he reported. "Estimate arrival in 40 minutes." As the Defender moved toward the Imperial Fleet, Jake could not help but think about how far humanity had come in such a short time. 70 years ago, humans had been confined to a single planet called Earth. Then came the discovery of the Morrison Drive, which was named after his great-grandfather, and it allowed faster-than-light travel. Within 2 decades, humanity had established colonies on dozens of worlds and pushed out into the galaxy with determination. The Galactic Empire had noticed them almost immediately. At first, the Empire seemed amused by these newcomers who appeared out of nowhere. Then came the demands, and they were not polite requests. Surrender your technology and accept Imperial governors and pay tribute to the Empire. Humanity had refused every single demand without hesitation. The Empire had expected quick compliance because every other species had submitted. Instead, they found a species that did not understand the concept of backing down or surrendering. "Approaching the Imperial Fleet now," Sir Danny announced, and his voice had a slight tremor in it. Jake studied the view screen carefully. 12 massive Imperial warships hung in space like dark predators, and each one was twice the size of the Defender. Their hulls were adorned with the golden crest of the Empire, and it was a symbol meant to inspire awe and fear in anyone who saw it. "Open a channel to the flagship," Jake ordered, and Amy's fingers danced across her console. A tall alien appeared on the screen, and Jake recognized him immediately. High Commander Zethran of the Imperial Fifth Fleet had the typical features of the Vaxxer species. His skin was pale blue, and he had 3 eyes that glowed with an inner light. A crown of crystalline horns grew from his head, and his elaborate uniform was covered in medals and decorations that showed his rank and achievements. "Human vessel, you dare approach an Imperial?" Formation, Zethran said, and his voice was filled with contempt and disbelief. Jake kept his face neutral and professional. "High Commander, I bring a message from Terran Command. As of this moment, human space is closed to all Imperial vessels. You are ordered to withdraw beyond the neutral zone and maintain a distance of no less than 5 light-years from our borders." Zethran laughed, and it was a sound like grinding metal that made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. "You cannot be serious," he said between laughs. "The Empire goes where it pleases. Your borders mean nothing to us. We have ruled this sector for 10,000 years, and you are newcomers who arrived yesterday." Jake kept his voice calm and professional, even though anger was building inside him. "Nevertheless, those are our terms. Any Imperial vessel that crosses into Terran space will be considered hostile and will be fired upon without further warning." Zethran's 3 eyes narrowed, and his expression changed from amusement to anger. You have 37 systems human, and we have 400. Your entire fleet numbers less than 200 ships, and we have thousands. You cannot possibly enforce such a declaration. It is meaningless, and we will ignore it. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. We can and we will, he said firmly. Consider this your only warning, High Commander. He closed the channel before Zethran could respond and turned to his crew. Helm, take us back to Patrol Position Alpha. All hands battle stations. They are going to test us, and it will happen soon. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, and alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Amy looked up from her station, and her face was pale. Sir, I'm picking up movement from the Imperial fleet. 3 destroyers are breaking formation and heading toward our border. Here we go, Jake muttered under his breath. Tactical target the lead destroyer. Weapons hot. Let's show them we mean business. The tactical officer's hands moved across his console, and the ship's weapon systems came to life with a low hum. Target locked, sir, he reported. The 3 Imperial destroyers were moving fast, and they showed no signs of slowing down or changing course. Danny checked his navigation display and looked up. Sir, they will cross into our space in approximately 2 minutes at current speed. Jake nodded, and his mind was racing through possible scenarios. They think we are bluffing, he said to his executive officer, Commander Sam Turner. They think we will back down at the last second. Sam's expression was worried. Sir, if we fire on them, this becomes a shooting war. There is no going back from that. Jake looked at the view screen and watched the 3 destroyers approach. He thought about all the human colonies that depended on Terran command to protect them. He thought about the families living on those worlds who trusted their government to keep them safe. He thought about what would happen if humanity backed down now and showed weakness. The Empire would push harder and demand more, and eventually humanity would lose everything they had built. We hold the line, Jake said quietly. No matter what. Captain Nicole Grant commanded the TCS Vigilant, and it was a patrol corvette stationed at the edge of Terran space near the colony world of New Portland. She had received Admiral Hayes' broadcast 30 minutes ago and immediately put her crew on high alert because she knew what was coming. The Empire never backed down from a challenge, and they would test humanity's resolve as soon as possible. Ensign Kevin Brooks sat at the sensor station, and his eyes were locked on the display screen. 3 Imperial destroyers approaching the border, Captain, he announced. They are not slowing down, and their weapons are powered up. Nicole had served in the Terran Defense Fleet for 15 years, and she had been through the border skirmishes and the Raider Wars. She knew Imperial tactics better than most, and this was definitely a probe to test if humanity would back down. Communications broadcast on all Imperial frequencies, Nicole ordered. Tell them they are approaching restricted space and must turn back immediately or face the consequences. Lieutenant Greg Palmer nodded, and his fingers worked the controls. Broadcasting now, Captain, he said, and his voice carried across all channels. The 3 Imperial destroyers continued on their course without any change in speed or direction. They are not responding, Captain Gregg reported after a full minute of silence. Nicole felt her stomach tighten, but her voice remained steady. Distance to border, she asked. 30 seconds at current speed, Kevin answered. The bridge was silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems, and everyone was watching their captain and waiting for orders. Nicole made her decision, and there was no hesitation in her voice. Lock weapons on the lead destroyer. Target their engine systems. Fire when they cross the line. Her executive officer, Commander Eric Stone, leaned closer and spoke quietly. Captain, we are 1 ship against 3. Those destroyers are each 10 times our size. Nicole looked at him, and her eyes were hard. I have my orders, Eric. We hold the line. The seconds ticked away and felt like hours to everyone on the bridge. The 3 Imperial destroyers crossed into Terran space, and their hulls gleamed in the light of the distant sun. Fire, Nicole commanded, and her voice cut through the tension. The Vigilant's main railgun fired and sent a tungsten penetrator round screaming through space at a significant fraction of light speed. It struck the lead destroyer's port engine and punched through shields and armor like they were paper. Direct hit, Kevin reported, and there was surprise in his voice. The airport engine is gone, and they are venting atmosphere. The destroyer lurched sideways as the engine exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The other 2 destroyers immediately opened fire, and their energy weapons hammered against the Vigilant's shields. The small corvette shook from the impacts, and alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Shields at 70%, the tactical officer called out. Return fire, Nicole asked, but she shook her head. Negative, she said firmly. Helm evasive pattern Delta. Get us back across the border. We made our point and now we need to survive. But as the Vigilant turned to retreat, something unexpected happened that changed everything. The damaged destroyer fired a spread of missiles, and they streaked through space toward the small Terran ship. Before Nicole could give the order to intercept them, the missiles detonated early and created a massive electromagnetic pulse. All systems offline, Eric reported as the lights on the bridge flickered and died. EMP strike. We are dead in space, Captain. Emergency power was struggling to come online, and the crew worked frantically at their stations through the viewport. Nicole watched as the two undamaged destroyers moved to surround her ship like predators circling wounded prey. This was not how it was supposed to go, and she felt a moment of fear for her crew. Then something amazing happened that would change the course of the entire conflict. The TCS Defender dropped out of faster-than-light travel and appeared like an avenging angel. 5 more Terran warships followed close behind, and they formed a protective formation around the disabled Vigilant. Commander Jake Morrison's voice came over every frequency, including the Imperial ones, and his tone was cold as ice. Imperial vessels, you have violated Terran space and fired upon a Terran ship. Power down your weapons immediately or we will open fire. There will be no further warnings. High Commander Zethran's face appeared on the flickering view screen of the Vigilant, and he looked angry. You would dare, he demanded. We were defending ourselves from your unprovoked attack. You fired first. Jake's response was immediate and sharp. Your ships crossed our border after being warned. You fired on Captain Grant's vessel with an EMP weapon. You have 10 seconds to power down and prepare to be boarded, or we will destroy you. 10 and 9 and 8. His voice counted down with mechanical precision, and the tension was unbearable. The 2 destroyers did not power down their weapons. Instead, they opened fire on the Defender, and that was their final mistake. The Terran ships had been designed for one specific purpose, and that was to punch far above their weight class. While Imperial ships relied on traditional energy weapons and missiles, humanity had taken a completely different approach to space combat. The Defender's main weapon was a magnetic accelerator, cannon that could fire projectiles at near relativistic speeds. When the tungsten-uranium alloy rounds hit the first destroyer's shields at that velocity, they did not just penetrate them. They went through the shields like they were not even there and struck the hull with devastating force. The destroyer broke apart in a silent explosion that lit up space like a new sun. Atmosphere and debris scattered in all directions, and there were no survivors. The second destroyer tried to run, and its engines flared to full power. But 3 Terran frigates cut off its escape route and surrounded it completely. Trapped and outgunned, the Imperial captain finally made the smart decision and powered down his weapons. Secure that ship, Jake ordered, and Marines began preparing for boarding action. Captain Grant, what is your status? Nicole's voice came through, and it was distorted by static from the EMP damage. We took an EMP hit, Commander. Main power is out, but we are working on it. No casualties, and we should be operational in 20 minutes. Good work, Captain, Jake said, and there was pride in his voice. You held the line when it mattered most. He turned to his tactical officer. Status on the 3rd destroyer, he asked. The one Captain Grant damaged is trying to limp back to Imperial space, the officer reported. Should we pursue and finish it? Jake shook his head and made a calculated decision. No. Let it go. I want High Commander Zethran to see what happens when you test us. Let him see a crippled ship return and let him count his losses. That will send a stronger message than destroying it. Amy looked up from her station and her face was serious. Sir, I am receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Hayes. She wants to speak with you immediately, and she sounds pleased. When the Admiral's face appeared on screen, she was smiling, and that was a rare sight. Well done, Commander, she said. You sent a very clear message to the Empire today. They crossed our border and we bloodied their nose. What are your orders regarding the captured destroyer, Jake asked. Strip it for intelligence data, the Admiral replied. Take everything that is not bolted down and scan everything that is. Then send it back to the Empire with another message. They are to keep all vessels at least 5 light years from our borders, or we will consider it an act of war. Oh, and Commander, she paused. Terran Command is promoting you to Captain. You have earned it, and the promotion is effective immediately. After the transmission ended, Jake looked out at the stars through the viewport. The Empire would retaliate, and he knew that with absolute certainty. But for the first time in decades, humanity had drawn a line in space and defended it with force. The game had changed completely, and the galaxy was watching. The crew of the Defender worked to secure the captured Imperial destroyer, while engineers helped restore power to the Vigilant. New Portland's orbital defenses went to full alert, and civilian transports were directed to safe zones. Everyone knew this was just the beginning of something much larger. Jake sat in his command chair and thought about what came next. The Empire had pride in history, and they would not accept this defeat quietly. They would come back stronger and more determined. But humanity would be ready, and they would fight for every inch of their territory. 2 weeks after the border incident, Ambassador Helen Ross sat in her office at the Terran embassy on the neutral world of Concordia. As humanity's chief diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council, she had the impossible job of explaining Terran actions to a galaxy that did not understand them. Most species in the galaxy had submitted to the Empire long ago, and they could not comprehend why humans refused to do the same. The door chimed, and her assistant Paul Martinez entered with a worried expression. "Ambassador, the Imperial delegation has arrived. They are demanding to see you immediately, and they do not look happy." Helen sighed and closed the report she had been reading. "Show them in," she said, and straightened her jacket. 3 Vaxxer diplomats entered, and they were led by Trade Minister Kelvar, whose crystalline horns were decorated with golden rings that showed his high status. "Ambassador," Ross Kelvar said with a slight bow that was more mockery than respect, "we must discuss the recent unpleasantness at your border. Please sit." Helen gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "Though I should clarify that there was nothing unpleasant about defending our sovereign territory. It was necessary and justified." Kelvar's 3 eyes narrowed slightly and his voice took on a harder edge. "The Empire has traveled the stars for 10,000 years. We have established protocols and treaties and agreements that govern interstellar relations. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 70 years, yet you presume to dictate terms to us." Helen leaned back in her chair and kept her voice calm. "We presume nothing. We simply enforced our borders. Something every sovereign nation has the right to do under galactic law." Sovereign spoke up a younger Vaxor named Sethan, and his voice was angry. "You occupy a tiny corner of space. You have no significant resources and no ancient lineage and no claim to greatness. You are children playing with technology you barely understand." Helen smiled coldly and her eyes were like ice. "Children who just destroyed one of your destroyers and captured another. Perhaps you should reevaluate your assessment of us." Kelvar held up a hand to silence Sethan before he could respond. "Ambassador, let me speak plainly. The Empire does not wish for war with humanity. But we cannot allow this insult to stand. You attacked our ships and killed our people. There must be consequences." Helen leaned forward and placed her hands flat on the desk. "After they violated our space and fired on our vessel," she corrected. "Perhaps the Empire should reevaluate its habit of going wherever it pleases without regard for the sovereignty of others. The smaller species of the galaxy look to the Empire for protection and guidance," Kelvar said, and his tone suggested this was obvious. "It is our responsibility to maintain order in this sector of space." "Then maintain order in your own space and stay out of ours," Helen replied sharply. "We did not ask for your protection and we do not need your guidance." Kelvar stood and his expression was unreadable. "I came here hoping for a diplomatic solution, Ambassador. I see that humanity is determined to continue this confrontation. Very well. The Empire will respond accordingly, and you will regret this decision." After the Imperial delegation left, Paul sat down across from Helen and shook his head. "That went well," he said with heavy sarcasm in his voice. "They are going to escalate," Helen said and pulled up a star chart on her desk display. "The question is how and where and when." She did not have to wait long for an answer. 3 days later, the colony world of New Portland went completely dark. All communication ceased and every signal stopped. When the TCS Defender arrived to investigate, they found the orbital defense platforms destroyed and an Imperial blockade in place around the entire planet. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and stared at the 15 Imperial warships that now surrounded New Portland like a noose. This was no longer a border skirmish or a test of resolve. This was an invasion of human territory and an act of war. "Open a channel," Jake ordered, and his jaw was tight with controlled anger. High Commander Zethron appeared on screen and he looked pleased with himself. "Captain Morrison," he said with false pleasantness, "how pleasant to see you again. I trust you received our message." Jake's voice was ice cold. "You are in violation of Terran space and have attacked a sovereign human colony. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. We will not ask again. I think not, Captain Zethran replied and gestured at the view screen behind him. New Portland is now under Imperial protection. We have determined that the colonists here require our guidance to prevent them from making the same mistakes as their government. Your people will be much happier under proper Imperial rule. Jake felt rage building inside him, but he kept his voice level and professional. You have 24 hours to withdraw, High Commander. After that, we will liberate our colony by force. Every ship you have here will be destroyed if you do not leave peacefully. Zethran laughed, and it was a cruel sound. With what fleet, Captain? You have what, and 6 ships in range? I have 15 with reinforcements arriving daily. Face reality, human. The Empire always wins in the end. Jake closed the channel and turned to his crew. Get me Admiral Hayes on priority channel. It is time to show the Empire what happens when you take one of our worlds. The transmission connected and Admiral Hayes appeared on screen. Her face was grim but determined. I saw the situation at New Portland, Captain. I am pulling every available ship from patrol duty. You will have 40 ships within 18 hours. That will still not be enough against their numbers, Jake said quietly. The Admiral smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. Then we will not fight them at New Portland. We will hit them where it hurts most. I'm sending you new orders within the hour. Prepare your crew for deep strike operations. The orders arrived, and Jake read them twice to make sure he understood correctly. Commander Sam Turner looked over his shoulder and his eyes went wide. They want us to attack Kelvor Station, he said in disbelief. But sir, that is 15 light years inside Imperial space. It is their main supply depot for this entire sector. Exactly, Jake replied. Admiral Hayes is sending 30 ships to New Portland as a diversion. While the Empire focuses on defending the colony, we take 12 ships deep into their territory and destroy their logistics hub. Without supplies and reinforcements, the fleet at New Portland will have to withdraw or starve. That is insane, Sam said, but there was admiration in his voice. It might also work, Jake agreed. Get the crew ready. We leave in 6 hours and we need to be fast and precise. One mistake and we will be trapped deep in enemy territory with no way home. The strike force consisted of 12 ships, and they were the fastest vessels in the Terran fleet. 6 frigates and 4 destroyers and 2 cruisers, including the Defender. They jumped to faster than light speed and headed straight into the heart of Imperial space. Every crew member knew this was a one-way trip if anything went wrong. Kelvor Station was massive, and it served as the primary supply depot for the entire 5th Imperial Fleet. It was 3 times the size of any Terran installation, and held enough fuel and ammunition to supply hundreds of ships for months. Destroying it would cripple Imperial operations in this sector and force them to retreat. Approaching Kelvor Station, Danny Price reported from navigation. Wow, that thing is huge, sir. Jake studied the tactical display and felt a moment of doubt. The station was defended by only 4 warships, which seemed too light for such an important facility. Then he understood. The Empire had never imagined anyone would be bold enough or crazy enough to attack this far into their territory. All ships weapons free, Jake ordered, and his voice carried to every ship in the strike force. Primary targets are the fuel depots and ammunition storage. We have 10 minutes to do maximum damage, then we run. Execute attack plan now. The 12 Terran ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately opened fire. The surprise was total and complete. Before the Imperial defenders could even raise their shields, 3 magnetic accelerator rounds slammed into the station's main fuel depot. The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a new star being born. The 4 defending warships scrambled to respond, but they were outmatched and outgunned. The Terran ships had been designed specifically for hit-and-run tactics with powerful weapons and fast engines. Within 5 minutes, 2 of the Imperial frigates were destroyed and the cruiser was crippled and drifting. Sir, secondary explosions throughout the station, the tactical officer reported. Their ammunition storage just went up. The whole structure is coming apart and there is nothing they can do to stop it. All ships withdraw, Jake ordered. We have done our job. Time to go home before their reinforcements arrive. As the Terran strike force jumped back to faster than light speed, Jake allowed himself a small smile. The Empire wanted to play games and humanity just changed all the rules. Back at New Portland, the Imperial blockade received word of the attack on Kelvor Station, and the bridge of the flagship went silent. High Commander Zethran stared at the tactical display in complete disbelief. An entire supply depot was gone and destroyed. 3 ships were lost. Months of carefully stockpiled supplies had vanished in 10 minutes of devastating human Attack, and now 30 Terran warships were approaching New Portland while his reinforcements had been delayed indefinitely due to the loss of Kelvor Station. Every ship in the sector was now scrambling to defend other vulnerable installations. For the first time in his long career, Zethran felt something he had never experienced before, and that was doubt. These humans fought differently than any species the Empire had encountered in 10,000 years. "Sir, the Terran fleet is hailing us," his communications officer reported nervously. Zethran straightened his uniform and composed himself. "Put them through," he ordered. Admiral Hayes appeared on his view screen and her expression was calm, but her eyes were hard as steel. "High Commander, you have 1 hour to evacuate New Portland and withdraw beyond our borders. If you are still in our space after that time, we will open fire and destroy every ship you have. You cannot possibly defeat my fleet," Zethran said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. He could see the 30 Terran warships on his display, and they were moving into attack formation. "Perhaps not," Lisa admitted honestly, "but we just destroyed Kelvor Station. How long can your fleet operate without supplies or reinforcements? And while you are fighting us here, how many other Imperial installations are vulnerable to strike raids? We have demonstrated we can hit you anywhere and any time. Can you say the same about your defensive coverage?" Zethran realized the trap he had fallen into, and it was a masterful strategy. The humans were not trying to win through superior firepower or numbers. They were using asymmetric warfare and hitting vulnerable targets and forcing the Empire to spread its forces thin across hundreds of systems. Every installation now needed heavy protection because humanity had proven they would strike deep into Imperial territory without hesitation. "This is not over," he said, and tried to sound confident. No, Lisa agreed, and her voice was cold. "It is not over. But it will be if you do not withdraw from our colony immediately. You have 58 minutes remaining, High Commander. I suggest you use them wisely." The transmission ended and Zethran stood alone on his bridge. His officers were waiting for orders and looking at him with questions in their eyes. He thought about ordering an attack, but the tactical situation was clear. His fleet was cut off from supplies and reinforcements. The humans had proven they would strike anywhere without warning, and most importantly, he had 15 ships against 30, and the humans had already demonstrated their weapons were superior. "Prepare to withdraw," he ordered, and the words tasted like poison. "All ships will evacuate New Portland and return to Imperial space immediately." His officers looked shocked, but they obeyed. Within 53 minutes, the Imperial fleet left New Portland and the blockade was lifted. The colony was free and the human colonists celebrated in the streets below. In the Terran Command War Room, Admiral Lisa Hayes allowed herself a moment of relief and pride. They had won this round and sent a clear message to the Empire. But she knew this was far from over. The Empire would not let this defeat stand, and they would return stronger and more determined. Claire Bennett, the defense minister, entered, and she looked exhausted. "Admiral, the Council wants a full report, and they are very concerned about retaliation." "Let them be concerned," Lisa replied. "We did what needed to be done. The Empire needed to learn that humanity will not be pushed around or intimidated." "What is the status of our fleet?" she asked. "We have 43 ships concentrated at New Portland," Claire reported. "That leaves our other colonies vulnerable if the Empire decides to strike elsewhere." "Then we need to be unpredictable," Lisa said and studied the star map. "We cannot defend everywhere, to once, but we can make the Empire fear attacking anywhere. I want strike teams ready to hit Imperial targets at a moment's notice. If they attack one of our colonies, we destroy 2 of their installations. Make them pay a price they cannot afford." Meanwhile, on the surface of New Portland, the colonists emerged from shelters where they had hidden during the blockade. Governor Patrick Chen stood in the main square and addressed the crowd through loudspeakers. "Today we have been liberated," he announced, and his voice echoed across the plaza. "The Empire tried to take our world and our freedom. Terran Command showed them that humanity does not surrender and does not abandon its people. We are free because brave men and women were willing to fight for us." The crowd cheered and many people were crying with relief and joy. Children who had been terrified during the blockade now ran through the streets laughing. Families reunited and held each other tight. The orbital defense platforms were being rebuilt and Terran Marines were landing to reinforce the colony's security. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defender and watched New Portland on the view screen. His ship had taken minor damage during the Kelvor Station raid, but nothing serious. Danny Price approached and handed him a data pad. "Sir, we are receiving thank you messages from the colonists below. Thousands of them, and they keep coming." Jake read a few of the messages and felt a lump in his throat. A little girl named Sophie had drawn a picture of the Defender and written, "Thank you for saving my mommy." A farmer named Henry wrote that he could now plant his crops without fear. A teacher named Catherine thanked them for protecting her students. These were the people they were fighting for, and it made everything worthwhile. "What happens now?" Sir Danny asked. "Do you think the Empire will come back?" Jake looked out at the stars and thought carefully about his answer. "They will come back eventually," he said quietly. "Empires always do. They cannot accept defeat or loss of face. But next time, they will think twice before crossing our borders. We have shown them that humanity does not back down, and does not surrender, and does not let anyone tell us where we can and cannot go in our own space." Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her communication station. "Sir, I am receiving a transmission from Ambassador Ross on Concordia. She says the Galactic Council has called an emergency session to discuss the recent events. The Empire has filed formal complaints and is demanding sanctions against humanity." "Let them file all the complaints they want," Jake said with a slight smile. "We were defending our territory and our people. Any fair court will see that." Amy nodded and continued reading. "Ambassador Ross says 5 smaller species have also contacted her. They want to know how we stood up to the Empire. They want to learn from us." Jake felt a surge of pride at that news. For centuries, the smaller species had lived under Imperial domination because they believed resistance was impossible. Now humanity had proven that even a smaller nation could defend itself against a larger power. It was not about size or numbers. It was about courage and determination and the willingness to fight for what was right. The Defender remained on patrol near New Portland for the next week. Engineers worked around the clock to repair the damaged orbital platforms and install new weapons systems. Terran Marines trained the local militia and helped establish better defensive positions. Supply ships arrived with food and medical supplies and construction materials. Jake spent time visiting the colony and meeting the people they had saved. He shook hands with farmers and teachers and shopkeepers and children. They all wanted to thank him and his crew personally. It was humbling and reminded him why they served in the defense fleet. One evening, Governor Chen invited Jake to dinner at his home. They sat on the porch and watched the sunset over the colony. "This is a good world," Governor Chen said quietly. "My family has been here for 3 generations. We built something beautiful, and the Empire tried to take it away." Jake nodded and sipped his drink. "You built something worth fighting for," he replied. "That is what makes humanity strong. We build and create and defend what is ours. The Empire only knows how to conquer and control." Governor Chen smiled. "You know, Captain, the people here are calling you a hero." Jake shook his head. "I am not a hero. I am just a soldier doing my job. The real heroes are the people like you who build these colonies and raise families and create communities in the darkness of space. We just make sure you can do it safely." They sat in comfortable silence and watched the stars come out one by one. Somewhere out there, the Empire was licking its wounds and planning its next move. But for tonight, New Portland was safe and free. And that was enough. 3 months after, the liberation of New Portland Ambassador Helen Ross stood before the Galactic Council on Concordia, and the chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species. All of them were watching to see how the upstart humans would explain their actions. The air was thick with tension and curiosity and some fear, because humanity had done something no one thought possible. The council speaker was an elderly member of the Quinn species named Elder Var, and he gestured for Helen to approach the center platform. "Ambassador Ross, the Galactic Empire has filed a formal complaint against humanity, citing unprovoked aggression and destruction of Imperial property and violation of the Concordia Accords. How do you respond to these serious charges?" Helen stepped forward, and her voice was clear and confident and carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "Elder Var and esteemed council members, humanity rejects these accusations entirely. We did not commit aggression, but we responded to aggression. The Empire invaded our sovereign territory and blockaded our colony and refused diplomatic solutions. We acted in self-defense, as is our right under the very same Concordia Accords the Empire now hides behind. Trade Minister Kelvar rose from the Imperial delegation and his 3 eyes burned with anger. Self-defense, he said loudly. You destroyed a civilian supply depot 15 light-years inside Imperial space. You killed over 300 Imperial citizens in that unprovoked attack. How do you justify this act of terrorism? Helen did not flinch, and her response was immediate. Kelvor Station was a military installation supporting an invasion force. We gave ample warning for evacuation through standard channels. Our intelligence indicates only 47 casualties, and all were military personnel who refused to abandon their posts. The Empire's inflated numbers are propaganda designed to make us look like monsters. A murmur ran through the council chamber, and Helen knew she had scored a point. Elder Var raised a hand for silence. The council will now hear testimony from neutral observers. Captain Jexstar of the Independent Merchant Guild, please come forward. A tall insectoid alien stepped to the center of the chamber, and its multiple eyes scanned the crowd. Honored Council, my vessel was present at the New Portland system during the Imperial blockade. I witnessed Imperial ships fire upon civilian evacuation transports attempting to leave the colony. 3 transport ships were destroyed before Terran forces arrived to provide cover. The Empire's claim of protecting the colonists is demonstrably false. I have complete sensor logs, and I am submitting them to the Council for independent verification. Kelvar's face darkened, and he stood abruptly. Captain Jexstar, you are mistaken. Those were not civilian transports. They were military vessels attempting to smuggle weapons. Jexstar turned to face the Imperial delegation, and its voice was cold. I have been a merchant captain for 30 years, Minister. I know the difference between a civilian transport and a military vessel. Your ships fired on unarmed colonists, and that is a war crime under galactic law. The testimony continued for hours, and more witnesses came forward. Neutral observers and merchant captains and even some smaller species who had suffered under Imperial expansion spoke out. They told stories of Imperial aggression and forced compliance and threats. By the end of the day, a clear pattern had emerged, and everyone in the chamber could see it. The Empire had overreached, and humanity had called their bluff. Elder Var finally spoke after the last witness finished. The Council has heard sufficient testimony. We will deliberate and issue a ruling within 3 standard days. This session is adjourned. Helen returned to her embassy and found Paul waiting with more news. Ambassador, I just received word from Admiral Hayes. The Empire has withdrawn all ships to at least 10 light-years beyond our borders. They are calling it a strategic redeployment, but intelligence says they are reinforcing defensive positions around key installations. Helen smiled and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They are afraid we will strike again. Good. Fear might teach them to respect boundaries and sovereignty. There is more, Paul continued. 5 smaller species have formally requested to open diplomatic relations with us. They want to learn how we stood up to the Empire. They want to know if they can do the same. The galaxy is watching, Helen said thoughtfully. We need to be very careful about what message we send next. We defended ourselves, but we are not conquerors. We are not the Empire. 3 days later, the Galactic Council issued its ruling, and the chamber was packed with observers. Elder Var stood at the center platform and read from an official document. After careful deliberation and review of all evidence, the Council finds that the Galactic Empire violated the sovereign space of the Terran Federation. The Empire's blockade of New Portland was an act of aggression, and humanity's response was justified under the right of self-defense. Furthermore, the Council establishes new protocols that limit the movement of military vessels near the borders of other sovereign nations without prior approval. The chamber erupted in noise, and some species cheered while others looked shocked. The Empire had been censured publicly for the first time in centuries. Kelvar stood, and his voice was tight with controlled rage. The Empire does not accept this ruling. We will appeal, and we will seek justice through other means. Elder Var looked at him with ancient eyes. You may appeal, Minister, but the ruling stands. The Empire is not above galactic law. Helen felt triumph surge through her, but she kept her expression neutral. It was not everything she had hoped for, but it was enough. The Empire had been checked, and humanity had earned respect from the galaxy. Back on the TCS Defender, Captain Jake Morrison received the news while on patrol near the newly reinforced border. His crew cheered when they heard about the Council's ruling, and there was celebration throughout the ship. "What happens now?" Sir Danny Price asked. "Do you think the Empire will come back and try again?" Jake looked out at the stars and thought carefully about his answer. "They will come back eventually," he said quietly. "Empires always do. They cannot accept permanent defeat or loss of status. But next time they will think twice before crossing our borders. We have shown them that humanity does not back down and does not surrender, and does not let anyone tell us where we can and cannot go in our own space. So we keep watching the border." Danny asked. "We keep watching the border," Jake confirmed. "And we keep building ships and training crews and preparing for the day when the Empire decides to test us again, because they will test us. They cannot help themselves, but when they do, we will be ready and we will remind them again why you do not mess with humanity." Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her communications station. "Sir, I am receiving a transmission from Terran Command. Admiral Hayes wants to personally thank the crew for their service during the crisis." The Admiral appeared on screen, and for the first time since Jake had known her, she looked relaxed and almost happy. "Captain Morrison, I wanted to personally thank you and your crew for your actions. You changed the entire dynamic of the conflict and proved that humanity belongs among the stars." "Thank you," Admiral Jake replied. "We just did our duty and protected our people." "You did more than that," the Admiral said. "You proved that we can stand shoulder to shoulder with civilizations that have been spacefaring for millennia." The Council vote was not unanimous, but it sent a clear message. We are here to stay, and the galaxy needs to accept that reality. After the transmission ended, Jake turned back to his crew. "All right, people, back to work. The border is not going to patrol itself. We have a job to do, and we do it well." As the Defender resumed its course along the boundary of human space, Jake reflected on everything that had happened. Humanity had gone from being ignored to being respected, and from being seen as children to being recognized as equals who would fight for their rights. The Galactic Empire had learned a valuable and expensive lesson. When you push humans, they push back harder. When you threaten their homes and their families and their freedom, they will fight with everything they have. They will strike where you least expect it, and they will make you pay a price you cannot afford. Terran Command had banned the Empire from crossing the border, and they had made that ban stick. Through courage and determination, it was just the beginning of humanity's journey among the stars, but it was a strong beginning built on the right foundation. In the darkness of space, the stars shone bright and cold and eternal. Among those stars, humanity had claimed its place not through conquest or domination, but through courage and determination, and an unwavering commitment to defending what was theirs. The border would hold because humanity would hold it. New colonies would be built and new ships would be launched and new generations would grow up free under alien suns. The Empire would watch from a distance and remember what happened when they crossed the line. Other species would look to humanity as an example of how to stand up for sovereignty and rights. Governor Chen stood on New Portland and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the Defender was on patrol keeping his world safe. His children played in the streets without fear and his crops grew in the fields. This was what humanity fought for, and it was worth every sacrifice. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had changed it through the simple act of drawing a line and refusing to let anyone cross it. And in the cold vastness of space, that line held firm and strong.